Now, can I first ask, before we dig into you, the name of the fund is
Uh-huh.
quite astounding. I've never come across such a beautifully named VC. Can you give us a bit of a clue how the name came about?
Well, yes, I suppose so. I mean, like, I like it. My co-founders love it. Everyone we've spoken to loves it. I suppose the idea of a goddess is that if you look at Roman mythology and Greek mythology and Hindu mythology, I'm Hindu myself, the female goddesses are as strong as the male goddesses. And in some cases, like Athena and Ares, for example, Athena actually beat Ares. So the point is, we wanted to show strength, but in a way that was helpful to everyone, basically, and to believe in yourself. Right. And then Gaia is Mother Earth. And what we're doing is creating impact for 4 billion women on this earth. So it seemed like a very nice Goddess Gaia rings off the tongue. And ventures, I mean, every VC fund has
Got to
to
be
call
ventures.
ventures, but put the ventures in there somewhere.
I have a question to kick us off. I
Sure.
would love to hear more about kind of what inspired you to establish GGV. Is that the acronym that you use for the fund?
Yes.
And how your personal experience kind of influenced your investment decisions, especially for women's health and wellness.
Sure. So let me try and start with the first question. So my personal background is I've had cancer. I had very intrusive IVF. IVF and cancer don't go well together, I can assure you. And then I had an autoimmune disease. And those personal pain points really made me see in real time that we didn't have the right outcomes for women, not only in this country, but worldwide. And that precision medicine is required because we're all different, every one of us. And we need things to help us to get to where we need to get to. And my personal health scares and disappointments really gave me courage to look at this more head on. And actually, to be honest, gives me a real reason to understand why I even had it in the first place, if I'm being very honest. Because when you get so sick, it really makes you question why and why is this happening to you. So I look at it as a positive and say, this happened to me because it changed my trajectory, my career trajectory, to go and build Europe's first women's healthcare fund. And so there's a positive from the negative. And I suppose in a way how that's influenced my personal decision making when I meet founders. My other two co-founders are very analytic. They love the math, they love the numbers. I love those too, don't get me wrong. I have a PE legal background, but I look for founders, male or female, by the way, who have grit, determination, and real gumption, because that's what it takes to succeed, I think, especially in this market. And there are just times when I was going through my own hellhole, and actually it was my faith that really got me through that. So I need, and I like to see that in other people. So I think that's how it's influenced me.
No, I love that. It's like, a lot of people when they, have a startup, it's based on a real life problem that they've experienced, right? And it's a very similar kind of situation for you. One thing I wanted to pick up on there before I hand it back to Chris was on some of those key elements for selecting startups in women's healthcare. What do people need to look out for?
Well, I think for me, sort of, are you asking for a founder's personality or just for the product itself?
Both, either or, whichever you feel is more of a factor.
Okay, so I think all founders, for example, need to be good decision makers, and they need to take their time to make a decision, but they need to execute fast after that decision. So for me, that's a common theme amongst leaders. I think in healthcare, because you have a longer period between seed and Series A, you need a lot of patience, you need a lot of grit, you need a lot of determination, and you have to want to do it. We've seen founders who on paper who are brilliant, scientists, brilliant academics, they have everything beautiful on the CV. Ultimately, running a company, building a company, that's a totally different skill set. And you really have to want it. And you're on 24/7. I worked 70 hours a week for the last 2 years on this
Wow.
without getting paid.
Wow.
And the only reason is because I firmly believe that we need this in the ecosystem.
And impacts that have come out from the investments, the portfolio so far, are there any that you care to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, some of our founders are doing wonders, like Biorhythm, for example. You can assess your fetal heart rate while the baby's growing inside of you. This actually helps with a reduction in having C-sections, reduction in worry and stress, which actually affects mother, affects baby, have healthier births, which is fantastic. They've taken, I think, 6 years to grow from inception to growth seed when we invested, and they're now in Series A in the US. It shows you, and it's because that founder, Amrish, his wife went through this and they couldn't find something to deal with the problem. Latchade by Anya, I mean, Dr. Chen is fabulous. She started her career in films. And then when she had her first baby, how to actually breastfeed. She was having enormous problems as a result of that. And she built her own algorithm. She built her own company. She then went out and raised money. She is now, I think, in 17 NHS trusts across the UK.
Wow.
And has won a number of innovative awards. So all these founders not only are making returns and profits, but they also create impact and real societal changes, which actually is beneficial not just for women, but for everyone. If you want happy families, everyone has to be taken into consideration. So I'm very proud of everyone in our portfolio, and I actually feel like a sort of proud mother hen. So it's a bit like how I feel about my own son sometimes, and it's great to see them grow, and it's great to see us being able to support them in that growth. And I think that, to me, is what VC managers should be doing, especially in this environment.
And they sound fantastic. The businesses you've mentioned, Priya. I'm always intrigued when I talk to VCs about how do you find these wonderful women? Is it recommendation? Is it going to lots of events? Just the blend in. Is it some of them that you've invested in recommend you as a fund to others? Just curious about that.
Yeah, so you're bang on the money, Chris. I mean, it's about deal sourcing, and everyone says, "Oh, I've got best in class," but how do you get best in class? Well, number one, it's through relationships. So making relationships with universities, making relationships with accelerators, with early stage investors, with angel groups. Alma Angels, I'm a member of them. They've got a fabulous setup, and actually gaining people's trust. And then, I think over the last 2 years, we've created, so Aya Suzuki, who's our head of ops and partner in GGV, I think she's created over 750 funnels. That's a lot.
Wow.
So you think we're doing this day in, day out, basically. And then I think, as you rightly said, Chris, the main thing is actually having other founders reference you to their friends who are founders, because that's actually the best recommendation. Because you're doing something right.
It's trust, isn't it?
Completely. And I think, in today's world where, everything's remote and we're on Zooms, people sometimes forget that actually going for a coffee and actually sitting down with someone and actually being there and working out, what are the best steps forward, it is so much more valuable than attending Zoom calls, because that's that interpersonal connection. So I would say the latter is probably the most important to us, but we have, like all VCs, built out our VC funnel. We have built out, different avenues to talk to great portfolio companies and founders. And then obviously we have a system internally of how we measure that. But yes, for me, there is no substitute in actually meeting someone face to face. Even if it's a 20-minute coffee, honestly, the things you can capture in those 20 minutes is not possible on a Zoom call.
True. So you focused on some of the founders which
Yep.
is brilliant. I believe you're fundraising still for the
Oh,
fund,
absolutely. Yes.
and I suppose the question there is, how big's the fund hopefully going to be?
Yep.
How are you finding the fundraising journey? Because obviously that's you doing the pitch rather than
Yep.
being pitched to. So yeah, are you finding it hard? Because obviously we hear the environment is tough for getting funding, but just wondered what your observations are there.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think this has probably been one of the hardest fundraising environments in the last sort of 15 years. And I used to, and part of my trajectory was that I used to help, big private equity firms, meet institutional capital. This is a totally different story. Our cornerstone checks are from family offices, and you really have to understand what their motivations for investing are, basically. It isn't a tick box exercise at all. And yes, it has been incredibly difficult. But at the same time, I think there is a process to fundraising as well. And I think one has to be very honest with oneself, because I think you can know after the first couple of calls if this is going to go anywhere or not. And I think that's important as well, to understand, like, where is the chemistry? Are you meeting the metrics? And not to take it personally, right? Because just because a fund of fund, you're not on, they can't invest in you because maybe your size isn't big enough, or you don't hit the right verticals, or you're not the right stage. It's not a personal no. It doesn't fit our investment thesis.
Yeah.
So I think that has been the journey, because when you're building something yourself, it's very hard not to take it personally. So one has to really grow in that perspective. For us, we funded the first 11 investments with our own money. That's how much skin in the game we had. And then our first close is very much family offices, and so that's thanks to our chairman James Benedict, who sits in NYC, and he has a lot of relationships with family offices, and so that helped us enormously. But now we are working with institutional investors, and we'd love to have them in, but their timeline is just a lot longer, basically, because they have very rigorous DD processes, and hence you build out a great data room. But I'm enthusiastic and still positive, because I still think good companies and good funds will still get invested in. And you have to know how much you want it, right? So there's no point having an idea if there isn't power and authority behind it. So we're still going. And we still believe.
Can you see perhaps a slight warming in the environment perhaps next year, or is it everyone's trying to have a crystal ball and predict? Just do you see that?
Well, I think this year has been incredibly difficult, because we're in there are two major wars going on at the moment. We've had Silicon Valley Bank earlier this year. I think investors have become quite concerned about the macro level, but ultimately, let's think this through. We're going into an election year in the US. We are every government is trying to stimulate the economy, and ultimately, how do other people make money? They invest. So people who would invest in us, let's say institutional capital, they have to invest for them to make money. So they have to do something at some stage, whether that's January the 1st or March the 1st, I couldn't tell you. I think family offices as well as preserving capital, still want to deploy. So there is a slow, I think, improvement in the economy. And I think that's important as well, to ensure that the economy is moving forward.
No, that's a good answer. So turning back a bit here, Priya, to the portfolio of businesses you've invested in so far. I think you've invested in 11 so far.
Absolutely.
The idea is to get to, I suppose, how many, and then within the portfolio, are there are there certain trends that you want to explore in the new investments that you may be looking at, or is it a similar? You tend to always invest in similar types of areas. I just wondered if you could, expand on the portfolio aspects.
So when we started plotting out proof points and data points in women's health, we realized that the biggest opportunity and delta was between seed and Series A, because it normally takes a healthcare company about 3 years to sort of get from one stage seed to Series A. And that's because they need to do regulatory pathways, they have to do clinical trials, and they need to create sales funnels. So we tend to invest at growth seed, so sort of halfway at that point where we've got about 18 months visibility at Series A. So for all our companies, that's the commonality, the stage of investing. But we've sliced and diced in women's health, which is fem health, into 5 very distinct verticals, because we think they are the trends of the future, but also that they're new markets. And so you've got the biggest upside in those markets. So for example, fem health and sport, we're very bullish on that. In the last, I suppose, year, you've seen how many different women's clubs being bought by other women, actually. So Olympic Lyonnais, the Warriors, so Michelle Kang. You see Amanda Stavely running Newcastle. You saw the Ricketts family buying the Chicago Red Stars. I mean, these are very important clubs which are being run by women. Women's sports are part, and women's football is part of their business plan. But if you want the best out of a women's sports team, fem health is part of that equation, because you cannot train players, men and women players, in the same way. They have different healthcare needs, different, that feeds down to dietary needs, menstruation as well. What about starting a family? These things are very important. So I'm very excited about that area of women's health, because I see that being able to bring in a wider audience of investors as well. People love sports. Look what, I've forgotten her name, Taylor Swift's done, right? In the US.
What's she done?
Well, she's going out with this chap, isn't she? And
the NFL player.
Yeah. And I was reading some stats, and I beg you to check those basically. But she's increased the watching of these sports
Matches.
by X%. And I was reading the other day that the women's football final, it was the second most watched sport on earth after the men's football final. So that's pretty impressive.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And so fem health needs have to be included in if you're trying to improve sport analytics.
And I think that's a great insight.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because when we were building this a couple of years ago, everyone was looking at us going, nah, that's not going to happen. And it's really exciting to be sort of like, of course, it's great to be right, but actually to see the empowerment and the improvement in sport for women, and that's really exciting. And I think that really helps down, young children, young girls as well, as they grow up as well, because there's a lot to be learned from sport, which actually translates into business. So I'm excited about that area. I'm also very excited about cancer and early diagnostics. The earlier you get to cancers, the better the outcomes. There are 7 cancers that women have that men don't have. The quicker you can actually, decipher what kind of cancer a patient has, the better the treatment outcomes, so that is very exciting. And that is also something that doesn't, need lots and lots of money. And actually it's where innovation, we're seeing a lot of innovation with AI in that area. So I'm very excited about that personally, and so is the team. And UK universities are doing a brilliant job in that area as well. So yeah, there's always going to be a couple of themes that you're particularly excited about. And for me, in a $1 trillion TAM, there are only 6 fem health funds in the US. We're the first in Europe. If you think about it, 7 fem health funds for a $1 trillion TAM. There's a lot of innovation that means. And I think it really depends how you slice and dice that.
I think medicine as well, it has a reputation for only catering to a particular profile historically, right? And that's been quite a shift recently, I think, and a lot of good work has gone into that. And to your point on these 7 additional cancers that men don't get, I'm sure that the traditional early detection methods for those are probably very subpar compared to more mainstream cancers and that sort of thing. I don't know if that's accurate, but that would be my hunch.
I mean, I mean, a lot of this goes back to, clinical trials, like who's included in the clinical trial.
Mm,
And, historically, women haven't been included in them.
yeah,
So how can you test for something and how it works on a woman if she's not included in the original
yeah.
trial? So
Systemic biases, yeah.
completely, right? But see, you get that. But, a lot of people have been fighting a patriarchal system where, it's, well, why should women be included? Well, because they have chromosomes.
At least
They have
50% of the
hormones.
population, if not more. I mean,
Exactly.
I think as well, a lot of people focusing on AI have had to focus on the quality of inputs to the
Completely.
quality of AI. And AI is just, a digitized system that runs automatically, but we kind of replicate that systemic approach in, the way we organize our organizations and institutions and everything. So the quality of the inputs is just as important in general organizations, right? And, systemized processes.
And LM models need to include wider data points, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're just recreating the problem.
Exactly.
You want to be creating a better system, a better holistic system, a better systemic system, a fairer system. And that means everyone needs to be included.
Priya, are you a AI is our friend or AI is our foe? Which camp are you in?
I think we're in optimistically liking AI. I mean, even in our sort of like logo, we have the AI symbol in there. We obviously want to be on trend and find the best technology out there. But we wouldn't invest in an AI product for the sake of it being AI. It's got to be able to do something efficiently and better. Otherwise, it's just a fad, isn't it? And I really appreciate your point, Anthony, before about the models around that. I mean, they need to be fair and inclusive. So that is what we're looking for. And I think it's very important not to jump on trends for the sake of trends. I mean, look what happens to crypto. It's not helpful. We need to look, especially with healthcare, because the downside is people die, right? It's a very high bar. We need to look at it long term. How is this technology really going to be helpful? And it really can as well, like even basic things like, I remember when I was sick and also was trying to have a baby. Oh my God, I was managing 6 doctors and 6 large files. I mean, AI can just do wonders of assimilating that information in one portal so that the doctor can look through things easily, as opposed to me pulling out, and this is only 7 years ago. Oh, my test results from this doctor, my test results from this doctor. This means this means this. Oh, and I had another test 2 months ago. It's like virtually you're running your own case.
And those 6 doctors are not acting holistically or in a coordinated manner with each other either, are they?
Exactly. And not to blame doctors. I mean, they are completely overwhelmed, right? But so they need that tech even just to streamline the process, and I think things like that. I remember, for example, we had to have tests, my husband and I, every day. And then we had to repeat that process for a new set of doctors. I was like, well, why couldn't you use the other test results? And we couldn't find them. What do you mean you couldn't find them? Isn't there a central system?
Classic.
And that costs us more money, more time, more stress. So I think AI certainly on that level is very efficient. It can make the processes efficient, but it also can be, used interoperably within products, so that you are building better, more efficient products for certain problems. And that's what we're looking at. Not, hey, I want to build something with AI because it's cool. I don't make loads of money. There needs to be a proper pathway.
So obviously the big focus of the fund is health, and within the UK ecosystem, there is a big hairy gorilla called the NHS. And I think, with your focus, do you tend to, avoid businesses with a high exposure to the NHS?
Yeah, so our investment strategy is very much first checks into UK, Europe, and sort of wider Europe, basically. So obviously, there will be some UK companies in there as well.
Yeah.
I would say 2 of our companies in our current portfolio and 1 in our pipeline is actually going through the NHS Accelerator program, which actually has been terribly helpful for those portfolio companies. I mean, from experience, yes, it's very hard to penetrate the NHS system, but once you have, it's a great resource as well for portfolio companies here, but what we're looking for, I suppose, is something much broader than that. We're looking for companies that can not only break it and do well in their sort of local country, so let's say the UK, but are able to translate into the US, because we would not double down on a company unless it's able to be translatable and actually be able to scale in the US. That's why we have a number of operators in our team who are US based, who are actually helping us with that process. So for us, when we're looking at a company, we're thinking, right, would we be able to get a CPT code for this particular product? Do we need one, first and foremost? We've got relationships with a number of different insurance companies within the US, which are called payers. Okay, great. Is this a model that could actually work in the US? Is it best in class compared to US technology and other companies in their subsectors? And can our operators genuinely help these companies go to scale in the US? So for us, the NHS is one part of that equation, but not everything. And so for us, the bigger picture is, can we take this company over to the US and can we bring it to scale? Because if I think about what our job is, we are the custodian of other people's money. Our job is to get them returns. We also happen to be creating impact, which is fantastic and which is very personal to us, but our job is to create returns. So to do that, we need to find those companies and identify them if they're able to go toe to toe in the US.
With that US focus, which is obviously the important stepping stone for all of the founders that you have, you do tend to point them in, in that direction, or guide them towards that.
So our aspirations are very much to scale our fund. So this is a first of 4 funds. With $1 trillion TAM, you can easily raise a mega fund. And we need to be cognizant of that system. But yes, this is the first of 4 funds. So, and where the investment thesis will get broader and wider. So when we're looking at our team in the US, they are dotted around the US, but most of our board are US based as well. So for us, the US focus is extremely important. And that's actually something we ask our founders when we're actually interviewing them and getting to know them. It's like, is the US a market you want to crack? Are you ready for that? Because if they are or they're not is a very personal decision. I'm very averse to actually backing founders who don't have the same desires and goals and mission as you are, basically, because this is about creating a family that actually works, right, with a shared vision. If a founder doesn't want to do that, that's fine, but they're not for us. But we're not for them. That's also just as important, because founders need to find the right investors who back their vision. So I think it's really about being very honest with each other and figuring out what does everybody want here. But for us, it's very much, best in class who are ready to create new markets and ready to go and scale in the US.
To start here, develop here, land and expand in the US via a rocket ship.
Totally. And, ultimately, the bottom line is, whatever you think of the UK is a great place to start a company.
Yeah.
It's quick, it's easy. You have Innovate grants, you have digitized records, you have a government that supports that innovation. So to a certain stage, if you are lean and you are ready to fight for what you're building, I think this is a great environment to build a company from scratch. And we've seen a lot of European companies actually reincorporate themselves in the UK for that very reason. And the NHS can be a great reserve as well for this. The problem is, how do you scale? And this is where we run into a roadblock. And
to get a venture outcome, you need to scale, right? So
completely. So this is it, so to get a venture outcome, you bang on the money. What are we trying to do? We get a venture outcome. How do you do that? You scale. And what do we need to do? Capture the US market. So, when we sort of reverse engineer this, we did think about this very carefully about what are we trying to achieve here. And it's not a foundation. It's not a charity. It's a venture where we are trying to get venture returns, which we are aiming for, which we believe we can achieve. And we want to do that for the portfolio companies, because if they do well, they will fund other founders in the same space.
Flywheel effect.
And you improve that ecosystem. And what we want is women's health to become mainstream, so that people, when they're sitting in big institutions and they sort out their portfolio construction, they go, hey, healthcare, this is cool. We can tick this box as well. And women's healthcare, it's not, oh, we need to go to a subcommittee of a subcommittee of a subcommittee to figure out if this is worth investing in.
Inspirational, Priya. I love it. So I think it's great that you have this passion and desire to direct and to help founders navigate the US, which I think, if anything, as a summation of the call, because I know we're coming to the end of the call, I think you'll have a nice queue forming of people who have listened to this particular podcast, because I think it's been super. And so I don't know if you have anything further to add on that, Anthony.
No. Appreciate your time and your efforts and inviting me on. So it's very kind of you.
No, it's brilliant. It's been really good to talk, really good to meet you. And hopefully we can do the next one. I do a number of Found Star breakfasts, which where I get people in the room, and it's a nice supplement to the podcast. And hopefully we can meet face to face in 2024. Enjoy your Christmas. And it's a thank you from me. And
thank you from me.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Take care.
Okay. Thank you.